Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to the 45th Right and Left Discussion Forum. The purpose of our discussion forum is to demonstrate the value of civil discourse. When we listen intently, consider objectively, ask for clarity, and respond respectively, then and only then is the discovery of common ground possible. Our topic today is immigration reform. Our panel today, beginning on my left, is Jerry Ritzman, chairman of the board of Ritzman Natural Health Pharmacies. On his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. And on his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, or I've recently learned electrochemist. I'll get that right from now on. Jerry, as you know, immigration reform has been a hot topic for several years now, and it's sort of heated up lately with the President Obama's executive order that may or may not have created new law. Give me your take on it.
I'll give you my take on what I think is an urgency that something be done with the situation with immigration. And I just read today a letter from the American Community Survey, which is a part of the Census Department.
The what department?
Census.
Oh, Census Bureau.
Census Bureau,
okay,
right,
gotcha.
Census Bureau. and I want to mention these things because it reflects what is going on, and it makes it more evident that something needs to be done rather than each House of Congress offering a bill that the other ones will not even look at or consider. But it adds some urgency to it. They did an ongoing American Community Survey. It's an ongoing survey. And they were, in this particular survey, looking at 18 to 34-year-olds in the United States who are foreign born. In 1980 in the United States, there were 6% foreign born, what they term young adults. Now there are 15% nationwide.
It went from 6 to
15. In the West, it went from 12 in 1980 to 21%. In the Northeast, it went from 8% to 18% over that period of time. In the Midwest, it went from 3 to 9%, and in the South, it went from 4 to 14. The survey says that 1 in 4 young adults across the country speak a foreign language or a language other than English at home. That's nationwide. In California, 1 out of 2 speak a non-English language at home. In New Jersey, New York, Texas, New Mexico, and Nevada, 1 out of 3 young adults speaks non-English language at home. And what does that say to me is it says there is an influx and there's a greater presence of foreign-born individuals in the United States, and yet we, as a country, seem to be at a complete standstill and butting our heads against the wall about addressing the issue and how to make some systematic approach and systematic progress with addressing this situation. We ought to try and view these immigrants and people that want to immigrate is a resource rather than somebody that we want to keep out of the country. And this isn't just a Hispanic thing. I mean, I think most people, when they think illegal immigrants or immigration, we're thinking Hispanic only. But there's a wide range of immigrants in the United States. We see evidence of it in our daily lives. Mm-hmm. In Columbus, Ohio, there are 38,000 Somali immigrants, the second largest Somali community in the United States. There's even the Somali Community Association of Ohio down there, whose mission is to promote self-sufficiency through employment, education, and economic empowerment. Can we be against that? Can we be against that? I don't know if it was Churchill or who said, but it's been attributed to somebody that says, to every complex problem, there's a simple single solution, and most often that solution is wrong. And that is the situation with immigration. I think we have to look at the big picture and try and break it down then. And there's no one single thing we can do, but I think a starting point might be that we insist that our representative and that our senators let's take back and take a rational view of this in whatever political manner we can. And then once we get the big picture, we're going to have to do it like eating the elephant, maybe.
The what?
Eating the elephant, one bite at a time.
Okay.
And but the evidence is there. It's happening anyway, and we need to develop some system to do it.
Is he talking about diversity, Patty?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you know, it was interesting because when you started giving those numbers, I wondered what, you know, as far as the increase, what percentage of that was Latina, what percentage was Asian, because that is a large, the Somali population. Now, that figure that you quoted, were those undocumented Somalis, or were those?
That's total.
All Somalis.
Yeah, I think that 30% or so have citizenship, and others are on the pathway.
I would kind of make a broad assumption that many of them are
the
legal,
refugees,
because of the fact that that's the one way to come into the country. If you are in danger in your country, then you can come here and be basically granted asylum.
Yeah, their household size is like 7 to 8 on an average. So their families living together. They're probably making more efficient resources or use of resources as far as housing and so forth than the general population is. And I just point to that as an example.
You know, when you talk about diversity, unfortunately, there are people that hear those figures and they're frightened by them. And I don't understand why we need to be frightened. I mean, this country obviously was formed by immigrants from all different countries. And we've had, over the period of years, we've had, the Irish that immigrated into the country, the Italians that immigrated into the country.
More Germans than anyone.
Germans that have come into the country, Vietnamese that have come into the country, depending upon the period in history. And they have assimilated into this culture and have become Americans. While they may speak that foreign language at home, which I think is a good idea because I think it's important for people to remember their heritage and be bilingual. They learn English outside of the home and participate in this society. Solving the problem, though, I mean, I think everyone on all sides agrees that immigration needs reforming in some way, shape, or form. Our problem right now is the insistence that it has to be done by Congress, and yet Congress, because of political divides, has dug their heels in and have said, if it's not my idea, we're not doing it. And this is, both sides are arguing this no matter what goes. I understand the president's frustration and his executive order, which does not grant amnesty to immigrants, which I've heard. It does not grant health care to immigrants, which I have heard. It basically gives them a 3-year pardon, and only some of them, and basically a work permit for 3 years. And it can be, and the next president can change that law with an executive order if they so choose. I think it was a step to say we need to start doing something. Of course, also included in that executive order was an increase of security on the border. I do know that there's more security at the border now in the Obama administration than there has been in years, because he has increased that over his tenure. Do we need more? One of the things that he put in that executive order was to increase it. I wish he would have been more specific, because I don't really know exactly what it is, and I think that's some of the angst, from people. As far as deportation, I mean, I read a quote that John McCain said that it would take something like 700,000 trucks to deport all of the
11 million people.
The 11 million that are immigrants that are here illegally, and that it would stretch out for like 1,200 miles or 200 miles or something. That it's really not, and he was saying that's just not a practical thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I've heard, you increase security. I know there's calls to put the military. Our military is stretched so thin already. I mean, our National Guards are doing, serving their time in Iraq, in Afghanistan, everywhere in the world. And now we're asking them, okay, now come back and stand on the border.
53 countries. We have troops in 53. I think it's 53.
Right,
So
right.
some of them are down like 7 people guarding an embassy or something. But anyway.
Yeah.
Bryan, you're looking there with a smile on your face and ready to defend the president.
I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing. Immigration is a very important part of the fabric of our country. I don't think anyone here has not come from some sort of immigration, whether it's grandparents or great-grandparents or whatever. The issue is the illegal aliens that come to this country illegally, establish themselves through having a child. It's been well documented that a lot of these young women come up and to the border states, and on a little side note, 17 states have already banded together to sue the president over this particular executive order.
Yes.
And the burden that it is on these border states are to the point of bankrupting them. And I'm all for immigration. I'm all for the bright and the best to come into the country. That's one of the things that the president has ignored, is that we're allowing students to come here on student visas. We educate them, and because of the visa process, we send them home, and there's no way to get them back into the country. I was listening to and watching a CEO forum that was taking place over the last few days in Washington, D.C., and this was the biggest complaint that the CEOs of the major companies have, is that these students come here, we educate them, they leave, and we can't get them back into the country because there's been no pathway, there's been no method, there's been no process to have these people come back into the country.
But that was part of the Senate bill.
Well, exactly.
To broaden the visa.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The legislative process is messy. It is messy. And that's just the way our government's been formed. And for this president to somewhat disingenuously, my opinion, to say that, well, Congress hasn't done anything, he should be the uniter. He should have brought these people together and said, we need to do something. Of the 31 times that a president has used executive orders on immigration, this is the most sweeping in magnitude of all of the others combined. The rest of the executive orders, when you look at them, were extensions. Were smaller, and they were extensions of the law. You had a small little group carved out, whether it was a wife of an abused wife. George Bush, there was 1 million there. There were 500,000 over here.
Reagan did as well.
Reagan did as well. You go all the way back. Almost every president has used executive orders.
Reagan didn't use an executive order. That was a Senate bill.
It was a Senate bill.
Act.
But we understand as a country that we need immigration, but it's the illegal immigration that is taking place that really has to stop. I mean, there needs to be a pathway. I firmly believe that those people that are here, that the 4 or 5 million that he has granted this pardon to over the next 3 years, I hope they get their house in order. I really do. To extend these types of benefits to them, I just think it's precarious. And I'm all for immigration. I don't want to kick anybody out. I don't want to send boxcars full of them home packing. But we just have gone through the crisis at the border with all these kids that have come into the country. Now, that only was about a week's worth of news cycle. But there were thousands of kids that have come here because of, I think it was the DREAM Act. And all they had to do was make it here, and then they were in.
They were coming from Honduras, right?
They were coming from Honduras.
And the murder capital of the globe.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there was I think that was
They're fighting over American drug dollars.
And the same is true with the Somalis. I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, we just spent Thanksgiving up in Madison, and Madison, Wisconsin has one of the highest
Right.
populations of Hispanics, and it's a great community. It's very diverse. I mean, it's wonderful, but they're there legally. That's the point.
I know that at one time, Lorain, Ohio had the second largest Puerto Rican population outside of San Juan.
Yeah.
And you wonder why Lorraine?
Yeah.
They had
Why go to
a
Madison?
shipyard
It's
and a
cold up
steel
there.
mill. Well, I don't know. Ron, I hope you're going to give some clarity to exactly what the president put into his executive order. But if not, I'm going to a little bit later on.
Well, I was expecting a whole lot of controversy here today, except for Bryan, of course. I knew he would have something to say. As far as the presidents being the uniter, I have two words for you, John Biner.
I thought it was gerrymandering.
No. That has something to do with it, but everything does. No, there's all this controversy, mostly from the Republicans, as I can read it, about is this a legal executive order? Yes, it is. I think it's very politically smart. I think with the percentage of Hispanic population in this country, the Republicans have got to start wooing these people. They're not going to elect another president. What's the last Republican president who was elected by the popular vote, other than the Electoral College? Well, the Latinos, particularly in high electoral college states like California, are going to have a big voice in the coming elections, in the coming century. You know, and we're talking about deportation. I think somebody mentioned we think about Hispanics, loading boxcars full of Hispanics. Well, the number of illegal immigrants in the last several years has been at an all-time low. Partly because of the increased border
Legal
security.
or illegal?
Either way.
Either way.
Illegal
And our
immigration
economy
in
has
the
just
Southern
not provided the
states.
jobs that it used to.
And it's really hard, as I think mostly you sort of at least hinted at it, it's hard to be against, particularly for a party where family values is a big thing, to be against, to be for sending American citizen children into exile or being abandoned in the United States. I don't think anybody wants to do that, really. So, I think the president's executive order was a very smart idea at this point.
I'm wondering if the Hispanic organizations are going to feel that way after they've had a chance to really think about it. Because what it did was it deferred deportation and gave work permits and Social Security numbers to people who have children who are citizens. That could be reversed. The president talked about people being able to come out of the darkness. Well, they could be made very vulnerable by coming out of the darkness. When the work permits expire, and they're only delaying deportation. They're not eliminating it. There is no pathway to citizenship in this bill. And that...
well, it's a political gamble, isn't it? Okay, 3 years.
It is.
The next president going to remove that? Is he going to
Take that
want
risk.
to take on that firestorm from the Latino population that's going to happen, and also from us progressives?
And do you think also that he's doing part of this to bring the issue to the forefront, so that saying to Congress, you need to work on this. I know you had this bipartisan agreement in the Senate that was not agreed to in the House, and they wouldn't even address it. You're going to get the pressure to do something about it, because even conservatives are now pushing for, because they want more security. Well, it's going to go hand in hand with the reform in immigration.
Yeah. When I look at the Senate bill, I can understand reluctance on the part of the House. However, what we've heard out of the House is we're not even going to look at the bill, we'll do our own. Now, that's a monumental arrogance that we can't tolerate that sort of thing. It's just, look at some of the pieces of it that you don't like. But it's a bill that, first of all, it provides a 13-year path to citizenship that is tremendously difficult for anyone to qualify. And the bill calls for nothing to happen until the Homeland Security is certified that our border is secure, which means another 700 miles of fence and 38,000 new agents. Now, nothing's going to happen with the Senate bill. Nothing is going to happen until those things are put in place. This is a very difficult thing. Anybody that thinks there's an easy answer to this is
there
very
is no
wrong.
easy answer, but we don't live in a border state. And I have relatives that live in border states.
McCain does, and he is one of the sponsors of this.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other factors that go into it. And I guess I would fall back on all the statements that have been made. Nobody wants to send these people packing, but there needs to be an acceptable pathway for them to gain legal residency and citizenship in this country. There is no other country that if anybody can point to it, I'd be glad to back down on this. I've had kids live in foreign countries for extended periods of time. When they go to get their mail, if it's a package, they're asked for their papers to determine if they're there legally. On the street in Spain, my son is stopped on a regular basis because he's 6'2" and looks like an American, and he stands out like a sore thumb, and the police want to know if he's there legally, if his visa is in place. We don't do that here. You cannot get into Germany. You can't get into any of the European countries without the proper documentation. And when they do find you, you are deported. You leave that country. I had a friend sent their daughter over there. She was on one of those extended trips, and she tried to get a job in France to make some extra money so that she could get home. When they found out she was working, she got sent home quick, and the parents were handed a bill, for that. So there has to be some room here for cooler minds to say, okay, let's come together and say, we recognize the problem, here's an acceptable pathway.
Bryan, I wonder if people that are proposing different solutions really know what it's like on the ground. If the people in Congress and the people in the Senate, have they ever been there? Have they ever experienced this firsthand? Or are they just going off of what they've heard, read, or what their perceptions are? I mean, I would encourage people on an issue like this that our elected representatives and senators really find out what it's like and what the issues are.
Time for a congressional junket to Arizona.
Well,
exactly. It's winter time.
Something.
Maybe they need to listen to these border states. There's got to be something there.
Well, both Arizona senators sponsored this bill.
That was, and some of those difficult things are in there because it was a compromise, and it was let's get started on it. And you mentioned all the European countries. I'm proud of the fact that we don't do what the European countries do. That we are a democracy, that we have freedoms, and we're not stopped by the police just because we look different. I think that's the essence of the United States. So,
but their immigration policies, as far as they're concerned, work. And there's all those different parts that go into it. I'm all for compassion. I love people. We need immigration. We want these people to come here, but we want them to come in the front door.
It's really hard to compare ourselves to European countries. Come on, you can fit 6 of them within in a border of Texas.
But
for
see,
heaven's
once again, everybody wants to look at Europe when it comes to their social programs, but now on immigration, oh no, let's not compare ourselves to Europe. I'm saying that there are programs out there that work. And the magnitude of which we have here in this country, something has to be put in place.
Let's face it, we're talking about people from Central America when we're talking about illegal immigration into this country. We're not talking about the same kind of a pattern that Europeans came to this country to make a new life, to assimilate. And there was an ocean separating them from their homeland. In Southern California, Arizona, it's a walk back and forth. We're not talking about people who want to come to this country to totally assimilate. There are people that are sympathetic toward Spanish language in schools and so forth out west. But the thing we can't forget, it's hard to compare this to the European immigration to this country. I mean, when the Germans came here, my people, the French, my other people, came here. There was no going back. They came here to be Americans. They changed their names to sound more American. They named their kids Kevin and
They learned
Chuck.
a different language, you know.
would not speak their native language at home and all of that. But I think that right now the biggest problem we have with this whole thing is a Republican Congress. They're just stubborn about it. I couldn't believe it when I heard Boehner repeat the fact, we're not even going to look at it, we'll write our own bill. I thought, boy, you talk about uncivil approach to a problem.
I agree.
Being a Republican, I'm kind of embarrassed about that. Hope you are too, Bryan.
Well, that's going to change in January, so we'll see how much gets done.
Yeah.
We'll see where the real obstruction is come January. I really think you'll see a whole different.
They're going to come up with a new bill.
I think they will. I think they will. And I think that's what they asked the president to do, was to defer his decision until both the House and the Senate, and they could work on something together. There's enough Democrats that will vote for this.
They've waited, and he wants to attack the border security, and that's it. That's the only, and I've heard
messy.
too many of them say, we're not doing anything until this gets
So
done.
you secure the border.
Yeah, and it's,
Well, what point is there in having any kind of a law that you can't enforce? I mean, you're not going to have any type of control over immigration when you've got a wide open border. I mean, if you know how to swim, you're in. You know, I just made that up. Well, anyway, I wanted to close with thank you again for a very enlightening discussion. But I want to close with this thought. Listening, learning, sharing, and adapting are difficult concepts for someone who is all about instructing, demeaning, rebuking, and winning. Much value is missed when the desire to beat down another's position drives participation in a discussion, rather than engaging in a free exchange of ideas that advances the knowledge of everyone. I hope you all agree with that sentiment. Thank you very much.